Can everybody hear me? Hi, everybody. My name's Josh Kumler. I was asked to come up here and talk about honesty, so I will start by being honest. Megan and the team do such a great job planning this stuff. They asked me to do this like a year ago, and I haven't made it to any of these in that intervening time. And I'm sorry. I really tried. I don't know if this will exactly match the format that you're used to. I would like for all of us to think of this as much as a discussion, as just a me talking, particularly when we get to that Q&A section. I'd actually really like to hear from you guys, because basically the point of this whole talk is going to be arriving at a question. And so in order to arrive at that question, we got to take a journey. I got to talk about politics and race and even raising taxes. So trigger warning for all of those things, first of all. But know that I'm not going to make any bones about the perspective that I'm coming from in all of this and how I feel and how I am going to vote on a particular issue. But the point of this is not to convince you of that. It is context for arriving at that ultimate question that I'm going to ask. So I'm not representing any group larger than myself. It's just me here, and I'm going to try and be as honest as I can with all of you guys. But I would like for you all to be honest with me, so I'd actually like to start by asking everybody here a question. Who's going to vote? All right, that's an easy one. Now, a little trickier, be honest with me. Either party, who is planning on voting straight ticket? Okay? Now I'm going to be a little honest with you all. No offense. I don't know if you're really totally doing your due diligence there, you know? But this is also the last year per new state law that you'll ever be able to vote completely straight ticket. So hey, if you want to have one last hurrah, but then, you know, from then on really look into each of the people that you're voting for. I know it's a long list, but it's worth it. Now, last question. Who here knows about the nonpartisan ballot propositions that you will have to vote on even if you are voting completely straight ticket for either party? Okay, got a few people. And who of those people who know about them knew about it because I put a sign out front? Nobody? Okay, cool. I'm never sure if those things actually do anything, but you know, it makes you feel better when you stick it into the ground. So, if you live within the boundaries of the Dallas Independent School District, which is not the same as the city of Dallas, it's pretty confusing, but if you do, there will be 4 nonpartisan ballot propositions at the bottom or on the other side of your ballot. And even if you are voting straight ticket for either party, you will still need to fill those out. And if you're voting on election day, you're not going to have the computer there, so it's not going to force you to. You have to know to flip that over and check those boxes. I am very involved in the campaign called Dallas Votes for Kids, responsible for the sign out front, that is trying to get people to vote for, because you can choose for or against, for all 4 of those ballot propositions. So the main point of this talk is going to be about Proposition C, but I got to work my way there, so let's talk about the other couple real quickly here. There's Proposition A, which is a bond for more buses, because we had another government agency called the Dallas County Schools that was imploded in our last election around this time last year that used to provide transportation services, but also provided a fair amount of government corruption. So they're gone now, in addition to former city councilman Dwayne Caraway, who kind of got all wrapped up in that. And now it's every school district in Dallas County's own responsibility to provide transportation services. So DISD needs some extra cash flow for those buses, so they're voting on a $75 million bond. It's tax neutral to the taxpayers, but trying to buy some more buses. Proposition B, also completely tax neutral, fairly non-controversial. It's what's called a tax swap, and I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but basically they're refinancing some bond debt to be able to put some money towards the maintenance and operating budget. Again, completely tax neutral, but you can learn more about those things. We can talk more about it in the Q&A maybe as well. But now I want to talk about Proposition D, because it's important to understand Proposition D going into making a decision about how you vote on Proposition C. Proposition D, I like to think of as the shakedown proposition, because the state government is coming to the Dallas Independent School District and effectively saying, hey, some nice taxable property you got there. Sure would be terrible if somebody were to set fire to all of it, you know, something like that, some mafia shit. Because the way that the state finances public education is very complicated, and I'm sure something that you did not expect nor particularly want to hear about at 9:15 on a weekday. The important thing to understand in regards to the Dallas Independent School District is that we are entering something called recapture, which is known more informally as Robin Hood. Because how this is meant to work in theory is that wealthy school districts, upon reaching a certain threshold, send some of their property taxes that they make to fund their schools back to the state to theoretically go towards more poor school districts. I've used theoretically a couple times in there because there's a lot of nuance you got to understand. First of which is that you might be thinking, is the Dallas School District really all that wealthy? And the answer is no, it's not. Over 95% of our kids going to school in the Dallas public schools qualify for free and reduced lunch. And that's the way that the school district measures poverty. Over 95%. But when we talk about a school district being wealthy or not, it's calculated on a formula that does not take that into account whatsoever. The basics of that formula are the total taxable property value in the entire school district over the amount of students that are in that school district. That number for DISD has remained fairly steady. It's declined slightly, but it's actually declined less than they expected it to with the proliferation of charter schools and private schools within the community and everything else. But as you all probably are at least somewhat aware of, property values are increasing steadily every single year. And so we've reached a threshold where that equation is greater than a magic number that says that we are property wealthy. Funny thing about that magic number, it was determined in the year 1991. So we're very property wealthy in 1991 dollars. So great, I guess. But the other important thing that you got to understand about this is that when we say this money is going to be going to poorer school districts, that's technically true. By statute, they have to send that money to a different school district. But the total amount that they collect in these recapture dollars from every property wealthy school district, and there are more and more of them every year as property values continue to go up year over year throughout the state of Texas, because we do have a good housing market and economy at the moment. There's more money that the budget board can look at and say, oh great, we know we're going to have that much more in public education that we in our state's general fund do not have to cover anymore. So the total amount spent on public education remains unchanged, but local property taxpayers end up paying for more and more of it. And that brings us to Proposition C, which is an increase in the local property tax rate for property that lies within the boundaries of the Dallas Independent School District. Now, I can say, as the guy who's been having to learn all of this way more than I ever wanted to about the state's public school financing system, to be completely honest with you, it is entirely unfair that we, as local taxpayers, are expected to pick up the slack that has been left for us by our state's government, that has failed to update this funding system for almost 30 years now. It's completely unfair. And it doesn't address the actual systemic issue. It's not particularly good policy. And I will just say, on a personal level, being honest with myself, my wife and I should say, to be honest with you all, my wife bought a house in this neighborhood recently. I now pay the mortgage because she's in grad school, but she's the one with the credit in this relationship, so she definitely bought that house. I am not looking forward to the prospect of paying any more in property taxes than I already do. I've lived there for a year, and we did the whole thing, putting the money in escrow to be able to cover it, and they're like, oh yeah, we projected it was going to be one thing, and it turned out it was actually like twice that, so you got to pay us another $1,000 here at tax time. And that's only going to be even greater next year, whether this passes or not. So personally, I'm not looking forward to it very much. But the fact of the matter is, because Dallas is entering recapture as a result of this completely messed up financing system, there's a $50 million hole in our operating budget for the next year. And thanks to the first two propositions, we can get enough of a one-time cash infusion to cover that hole for this year. But until we get the systemic policy change at the state level that needs to happen, that hole is going to continuously be taken out from our operating budget every year. And it's going to get greater as the property values continue to go up and the attendance continues to remain about the same. Now, we have been implementing within the district a lot of programs that have shown a lot of promise towards getting more of a buy-in from the community and more students into the district that may end up offsetting that. But that requires an investment, not just of the funds that we already have, but of an increased investment. We have currently one of the lowest property tax rates in the entire North Texas, in the entire state of Texas for an independent school district. And there's a reason for that, and I'm going to come back to that. But the fact of the matter is that if we don't pass this, it's going to hurt in a lot of ways. And I'm going to give you guys just one example of that before I move on from this. There's a program that the school district has implemented called Accelerating Campus Excellence. And what that means is that they identify the schools that are the lowest performing in the entire district. The schools that have been on the state's improvement required list so long that if they stay on for one more year, the state has the legal right not only to come in and close that school, but take over the entire school board. and start making our decisions for us. So the stakes of this are pretty high. In a matter of 1 year, schools see jumps in test scores of 20, 30%. Blanton Elementary in Pleasant Grove was about to have to be closed and is now scoring on par with schools in the Park Cities. That is the power of this program, and the way that it works is it identifies the strongest principals in the entire district. It says, great, you have complete run of this school, now you hire all of the best teachers in the district, and it pays all of those people extra to take extra time that is necessary for these kids who are already behind and need the additional tutoring and the additional Saturdays in order to make those jumps and close those achievement gaps. And they do it, but it requires additional resources that go beyond basic classroom funding. So it will be the first thing cut if we don't find a way to fill this $50 million gap in our maintenance and operating budget. Those are the stakes for me. 5 years ago, there were 45 schools on Dallas ISD's improvement required list. This year, there are 4. It's the most improved urban school district in the entire country. And that improvement is directly at risk at the moment. Those are the stakes for me. That is why I am very passionate about this issue, and it is why I am deeply involved in the Dallas Votes for Kids campaign. Now let's talk about that campaign. It's funded almost entirely by an organization called the Dallas Citizens Council. The Dallas Citizens Council is a group of, some may have used the word, it may have even been me a couple years ago, oligarchs, if you will. This is the business leadership of the city. And they have been in the business of determining local elections in the city of Dallas in one way or another for like 100 years now. I used to have a show called Bar Politics. I would advocate for certain people getting on city council who I saw as progressive. Dallas Citizens Council undoubtedly would be supporting whoever the progressive person wasn't. I would say their name in bars and people would literally boo and hiss. And they have good reason to. So why are this business establishment supporting a tax increase that we know statistically will hit them harder than anyone else? 60% of the taxable property value is commercial, it's businesses, and the most highly valued property is downtown, where a lot of these guys own the skyscrapers. Have they suddenly had some Saul on the road to Damascus moment and realized the power of altruism? No! What they have done is run the numbers. And they know that it is worth their investment to have a workforce that is highly educated. And that they do, and rather than trying to import talent from everywhere else. So there's a lot of self-interest at play here. But there's also something even deeper at play here, which is that I mentioned that we have one of the lowest property tax rates in the entire state for a school district. And that's not by accident. It's by design, and it's by design in large part because of the Dallas Citizens Council, because for years, particularly in the 1950s and 1960s, they had a political action committee called the Committee for Good Schools that ran and endorsed campaigns for school board on the Dallas Independent School District. And when they were choosing their candidates, they looked at 2 criteria. One was, are you going to preserve segregation? And second was, are you going to keep the tax rate low? So a lot of people have a lot of mistrust with this organization. And I completely understand why. In fact, I'm even going to take it one step further. And it's another little bit of a tangent here, but it's fair time, so I can't help myself. Anybody here going to the fair this year? Another little honesty check? Yeah, some people? Okay. Well, if you do happen to go, you'll probably drive on Robert Cullum Boulevard. Robert Cullum was a former president of the Dallas Citizens Council. He was also a former president of the State Fair of Texas Board. During the time when Mayor Eric Johnson, in collaboration with the State Fair Board, worked to remove the, quote, unsightly shacks of people who were living on the State Fair property into what is now parking lots. And before that, he was a high schooler at North Dallas High School in the 1920s and performed in their annual minstrel show. You can look at a yearbook in the Dallas Public Library and see the guy who still has the boulevard in front of Fair Park named for him in blackface. People have very, very good reasons for mistrusting the Dallas Citizens Council. But does it matter who is pointing out the need for this tax increase if ultimately the winner and loser is going to be our public school kids? And what is my responsibility as someone with an awareness of all of this and with an awareness of the toxicity of their brand, which is in many ways hurting the campaign even as they continue to funnel funds into it, hurting it for the very reason that they are funding it? I find myself in meetings with these people now. Do I go in there guns a-blazing? Do I keep it honest and real? Look, the whole reason that we are in this mess to begin with is directly tied to your organization. I could do that. But then what is the best case scenario there? They take away the funding for the campaign? We have that much less of a likelihood of actually being able to pass this thing? What is the role of honesty when we're trying to enact the best policy? That is my question for you all. Discuss.
So we can open the floor for Q&A. Does anyone have anything that they want to ask Josh?
This guy.
I'm in real estate, so obviously property tax is a big deal. And pretty much every year, the last 3 to 4 years, values have been going up like 10% a year. So you get your tax bill, and you're used to paying a certain payment, all of a sudden now my payments have jumped to $100, $200 a month. So it's like, whoa, it's huge. And we're actually like in the top 5 property taxes in the nation, even though we're not the highest in Texas. But that's because we have low other taxes, corporate taxes. So we have high property taxes. Every year it goes up exponentially. So is throwing money into schools really going to fix the school problem? If the other side of it is unaffordability, economic difficulty for affording, is it worth it, basically? I know you.
There is definitely an argument to be made when we look at this equation, right, of taxable property over the amount of students. We know property tax is one of the leading drivers of gentrification. And gentrification is not good for trying to get more students into our public school system. There is an argument to be made there for sure, which is exactly why I say that it's not fair and it's not the best policy. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, I mentioned ACE, and I can talk about some other programs as well. We also have a collegiate academy system that's being implemented in a lot of high schools, one of which is Sunset right down the street. Who here know that you can graduate from a DISD high school with an associate's degree? Not even like doing dual credit down the street at the community college. You get all of your college credits at the school. Stuff like that, stuff like ACE, we can point to and we can say we know that this is working. To me, It is not a matter of throwing money and like crossing our fingers. This is a matter of finally we have come upon the concrete policy decisions that we need to be making to turn around our achievement gaps and our test scores and our post-secondary graduation rates. Which, you know, when I talk about people like the Citizens Council running the numbers, that's the kind of stuff that they're looking at, because that's the kind of stuff that living wage jobs require. So we know that the programs are going to help us move that needle, but those programs by their nature are not basic instructional programs. They're the stuff that's meant to come in and enhance that and move that forward into the 21st century. And it does require a greater investment. And that investment should not have to simply come from all of us. But I don't feel personally, I know enough about the Texas legislature to know that I can't say, well, let's just wait from now until when they decide to get their act together. Because we could be waiting for a long time.